A warm good evening and a warmer welcome to one and all to yet another edition of NIBM Audio Rooms. It gives immense pleasure to be here at the 16th edition of NIBM Audio Rooms, powered by HTree HR Consultants Private Limited, CL Cochin International Airport Limited, powered NIBM Business Quiz hosted by India Wants to Know, India's leading quiz company. Launcher 2023, sponsored by Soodchemy India Private Limited. DEI Masterclass held on 27th May has been sponsored by Ergo Consulting, an innovative event management company. DEI Awards sponsored by VGuard Industries Limited. We have Federal Bank Limited on board as our preferred banking partner. So now let us come back to our subject for the day. We have workforce analytics and insights is the subject for the day. Workforce analytics is a combination of software and methodology that applies statistical models to work related data, allowing enterprise leaders to optimize human resource management. The technology has grown more sophisticated in recent years, with the analysis it produces going beyond hiring and adjusting department structures to include whether such moves provide a return on investment. So, workforce analytics software comes under the broad umbrella of people analytics, also known as HR analytics. Now we have Swaraj Mishra among us. Swaraj Mishra is a human resources professional with more than 2 decades of industry experience. He has worked for reputed organizations such as Satyam Infoway, Sasken Technologies, Franklin Templeton, and FactSet Systems. Currently, he works as the global head of organizational effectiveness, people analytics, and programs for leading US MNC Pegasystems. He is based out of Hyderabad. He believes in analytic approach to enable effective decision making. Swaraj Mishra is also an ICF certified PCC coach as well as Six Sigma black belt holder. Over to you, Swaraj.
Um, Thank you, Prasita, for, for this warm welcome. Good evening, everyone who are on this show. It's my great honor and pleasure to be here today to speak about workforce analytics and insights. In next um, half an hour to 40 minutes, we are going to go through this journey of data to analytics to insights. What do these different terminology mean? How are they used in day-to-day life? How are they used in HR? And as HR professionals, how can we make best use of those for effective decision making, for effective business partnering, for looking at our workforce for future planning? I have a small presentation here, so I'm going to share my screen. So in this presentation today, we are going to look at what are the different definitions and need about different terms within workforce analytics domain. What are the kinds of analytics? We keep on hearing a lot of terms. What exactly is analytics? What is insight? How are they interrelated? What are the different levels inside those? We are also going to talk about what is a good data analysis. How do we present it for better use? We are also going to talk about the journey or the travel of data from complete backend to final decision making. We are going to look at the different skills required for HR, for analytics, and finally, we are going to talk about some of the key workforce metrics. Before I start, I think, let me take a small example to explain the use of analytics in day-to-day life. I believe most of us here are quite familiar with cricket, and IPL 23 is something which is very recent. if we go back to IPL 23, there are different ways of looking at the data. One way is we can list down all the individual scores done by every batsman in every single match. We can start compiling those. We can look at the total scores. We can look at the highest. Then we can analyze this further in terms of who have the best averages, who have the best strike rates, and it's a complete field for everybody uh, who has the analytical bent of mind to go on looking for research and more interesting examples. Then let's take it even a further step beyond. When you combine all this data, we can all think about, okay, this sets up batsmen. They do well when they face spin bowling, when they face when they face swing, when they bat first, when they bat second. So these are the insights that we can gather from the data, and we can take it one step further to say, okay, we are team X, we are facing team Y. Let's look at the relative strengths, weaknesses purely from data and analyze what kind of team structure, what kind of attack, what kind of combination is going to be useful for us. So it's the same set of data. We can talk at many different levels. And that's where the use of data analytics at many different levels comes in. We are going to talk more about their use in HR as we progress. So let's look at some key definitions. Workforce, if we look at workforce analytics, which is within the HR domain, it's the process of organizing, analyzing, and reporting all talent or workforce or HR data to support management decision making. The key point to note over here is data per se is not of much use. If we only analyze data, there is we can take it way beyond its obvious usage. We need to take it for management decision making. When we talk about insights, here we try to find patterns, we try to find trends, stories, so that we can build upon this further. We can, instead of looking at sets of tables or some other charts, we can actually talk about what is the story which is coming out, what is the pattern, how is the industry going to behave in the coming times. And all of these combined together, they help in workforce planning, which which is essentially about maximizing the organization's talent. Where do we have the talent? What is the roadmap? Where are we going to invest? Where are we losing people? Where are we hiring people? Which skills are easy to get? And if we have to meet our target in 5 years time from now, if that is our roadmap as a company, as a team, as an organization, what kind of workforce strategy we need to build? So this is a complete journey where workforce analytics comes in handy. There are many uses of workforce analytics. I'm not going to go through each one of those. Just a few highlights, starting with hiring to talent engagement. We can talk about efficiency. We can talk about cost management. We can talk about strategic workforce planning, even compliance. All of these can be done through workforce analytics. Okay, so far so good. We speak about how analytics is finally going to be used. But we also hear there are so many different kinds of analytics. I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about all these different types of analytics that we hear. First, we hear about the descriptive analytics. Then that goes up to the next level, which is diagnostic, then predictive, and prescriptive. What are these four different kinds of analytics that we use? Let's start with descriptive. Descriptive analytics is more in the past. What happened? We're focusing only on the data. If I go back to my example of cricket, all the matches happened in IPL. We have compiled all the data. We know what happened. We know who are the batsmen, how many runs they score, who are the bowlers, how many wickets they got, who won, who lost. That is descriptive. We are talking about the what of the past. We we can go a little beyond and do a few summary tables, but it generally stays with that level. This is very early stage of data analytics. Moving one more step beyond, we talk about why or how. Okay, here if we look at the same example, we can talk about what did these teams do good. Did they have great partnerships? Did they have better strike rates? Did they have more consistent players? Did they rotate the team more effectively? So these are the things where we diagnose. That again stays with the past. We look at the past data and talk about what answers we get from the past data about the why or the how. How did that happen? Then we move to the next step, which is predictive. Here we start looking at the future. If these are the things, then what might happen in the future? If these are the combinations, then how this team might perform in the future. I'll give you one more example. There are so many marketing companies who looked at the IPL data very closely. They would be identifying which matches have more viewership, what kind of audience is there. If a particular batsman come to play, are there more people watching? Then those become the prime slots for advertisement. How do we make targeted audience appeal? So predictive goes one more step beyond, talks about future. Based on the past, how do we look at future? And finally, we come to prescriptive. We have understood the future, but what are we recommending? This might happen. How do we overcome that challenge? Or how do we make best outcome out of that situation? Here comes the example of prescriptive. Even in the HR world, if we look at here, looking at past attrition, how many people left during last 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, that becomes descriptive. That's about the past. We are listing down how many people we lost. In diagnostic, we're going to look at why did they leave, what kind of teams from which they left, what kind of skill set, what tenure, what performance rating. That becomes diagnostic. We analyze more. In predictive, we go one more step beyond and we start talking about, okay, we see that in these particular months, we lose more people because they want to go for higher studies. I'm sure many of us would be familiar with those. There are certain seasons when people go for higher studies abroad and our attrition spikes up that time. If that's the case, then how do we counter that? That becomes prescriptive. What might happen is predictive. When are we likely to lose more people for higher studies in these particular months? That is predictive. But what can we do to prevent, or what can we do to mitigate that risk? You may not be able to prevent that every time, but you can mitigate that risk by preempting that, okay, this might be our attrition rate coming up, and how do we start filling in those positions early. That is true workforce planning, where we can use prescriptive analytics. Okay, let me reshare my screen. So these are the four levels of analytics that we uh, keep on hearing about. If there are any questions so far, please feel free to share those, and we'll get to answering those. Now, let's move on to the next part. Uh, I believe this screen share is not changing. Give me a moment. Thank you. Sorry about that. I believe the screen was not changing. So let me give a quick recap about what I've covered so far. We were talking about the key definitions about workforce analytics, insights, and workforce planning. Then we're talking about the kind of workforce analytics, some examples, and we're talking about the types of analytics, that is descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive. Now I'm going to move on to the next slide where we talk about the overall journey. It's kind of similar to what we saw in the previous slide, but it's a little different because it's related to how we deal with it on a day-to-day basis. So first step in this journey is what we call as data reporting. So if we look at the HR data, we talk about, let's say, list of all new hires in last 5 years with all their details. Okay, let's say we're talking about campus, which colleges, what kind of specializations, which teams did they join. So putting all of that together is the first level of analytics, which is reporting, and it's quite and it's quite extensive, lot of data, but it's very difficult to make meaning out of it. From there, we move on to what we call as analytics. We look at making tables, we look at making analysis, we start looking at what are the colleges from which we have hired the maximum, where uh, how many candidates did we make an offer, how many joined. So all those become analytics. Moving one more step beyond, here is the division between analytics to insights. In the first two steps, we are reporting about the history, about the past, about the data that we see. When we move to the next two, insights and predictive insights, we are talking about the future. We are helping the management make a decision. If we are hiring for X skills from Y colleges, they can give a better performance. I'm sure we can relate to these kind of examples in day-to-day life. Okay, I've been hiring from so many colleges, but if I hire from that college for that particular team, they seem to do better. So let me focus on that. That becomes insight. And finally, when the predictive insights is the true workforce planning, here we talk about in 5 years from now, the market, let's say, is becoming very competitive for a particular skill. I, I took up AI as a skill because that's what everybody is talking about nowadays. So if in 5 years the market is becoming competitive for this skill, then how are we going to get that talent when everybody is fighting for that skill? Can we build that pipeline? Can we train our people? Can we hire similar stream graduates and kind of train them to take up those positions so that our internal pipeline is there? That way we can help the organization meet its future challenges, meet uh, the cost requirement, and still build a career pipeline for an employee. This is where workforce analytics comes in handy. You pick up any stream of our day-to-day work of HR, all of these can be useful. Okay, many people report data in many different forms. You go online, look at the different tools, look at different statistics. You find so much of data. Very frequently, it becomes difficult to understand what exactly is the data saying, because most of the data stays in the first two parts, reporting and analytics. It doesn't move from there to insights. With so much of data, it might become confusing for the end user, and if it's confusing, it's very difficult to take a proper business decision. So how can we help as HR professionals? So I have prepared this 2 by 2 grid about insights that matter. Here, from left to right, we are talking about utility of the data, utility of the analytics, or the insights. How useful are these? And from bottom to top, we are talking about complexity. How complex? Let's start with the bottom left. If it's low on utility and low on complexity, it's mostly trivial data. Nice to hear, but doesn't make much sense for anyone. Let's say someone comes up with some kind of analysis like, okay, we have got the most common name in our company is, let's say, ABC. Fine, that's a simple data that produced, presented, but how is it useful? I took a very obvious example, but we find many other such cases in our day-to-day life. So that kind of data is trivia. We as HR professionals should not bother too much dealing with the trivia aspect of it. Then we'll find another, okay, if we go to the top left, what I call as noise. This data is very low on utility but very high on complexity. Most of these you'd find in fancy charts, lot of interplay of numbers, very very complex tables. At times it takes hours to just understand what is the data saying, and once we understand, we don't know how we are going to use it. Have we come across this kind of data? I'm sure all of us would have come across. Even in cricket, any sphere we take up, we get so much data which is very complex but of hardly any use. That's noise. And these are many times we find many ppts full with those kind of data, but you can't really use those. So left side is not really for us to venture into. Now let's move on to the right side, utility, which is high utility. So high utility with high complexity, those are useful data but unsustainable. Here we need, there are cases we actually need that kind of data. We need deep analysis. There would be a team which would be breaking hours into understanding such kind of data which would be useful for the company in the long run. Sales data, or let's say the deep insights about candidates, useful but extremely complex. In such cases, we spoke about the tools, the softwares. So these tools or softwares come in very handy in breaking that data and making sense out of it, so that all of these can move to the bottom right box, which is the desired state. Ultimately, the objective of data analytics or insights are to provide high utility but low on complexity. So this is a journey. As professionals, our objective should be on the bottom right section of this box. And that's where the success of analytics comes in. When we share data, I I keep on using data because that's something which is common between, whether we talk about analytics, we talk about reports, we talk about insights. So everything is formed on the foundation of data. I I call it as the ABCD of data. A, it should be accurate. If our data is not accurate, it loses all its value, no matter how fancy it is. If the data is wrong, we can't use it. That's the first principle. Second, B, it should be business focused. Data for the fun of it becomes trivia, is of no use. So it should be focused on what do we need. So when I say business, it's like what business we have with the data. Is it useful for us? So that's B. C, it should be clear and simple. No one likes too complicated data because only a few will really understand that, and making decisions out of those becomes very difficult. And D, which is the end objective for any analytics or any insight, is to be take decisions. So data should support decisions. So that's the A, B, C, D of data presentations. I always keep it at the back of my mind whenever I work on any analytics, any insights for anybody to use. I keep this principle A, B, C, D. In the beginning, I spoke about how does data travel. Let me take you through this chart. Looks a little complicated. It it goes to my upper side box of complex. So let me try and simplify it. Data analytics and data insights are not a simple job of finally going and presenting. There is a long way that we have to follow. It starts with the data source, which is often kept in the forms of tables at the back end. Depends on what kind of systems you have. It can be in the form of multiple Excel charts. It can be in the form of a, you know, any kind of HRI systems, data warehouse. So there can be many different forms in which data can be sourced. But that data is not of much use for the end users. So we need to scrub it. We need to organize the data into a form that can be processed. So after the data is organized, we move to the process or the analysis phase. Data is analyzed. Most people, you know, most people are comfortable doing the analysis in a process through Excels or through tables. But today there are so many softwares are available which can help us, process and analyze data. There are tools available which we can use. Some of those are available online. Some of those need to be purchased. But we can use any tool to simplify the data and process. Once that part is done, once analysis is done, then we move to the stage of insights. So from analysis, when you move to insight, the first step over there is to visualize. What is the meaning of data visualization? We as human beings are normally comfortable seeing something in front of us. So those data tables, charts, if any of you here are familiar with something like Power BI, you'd see how different data kind of interacts. The charts interacts with themselves. You see how I want to see who all are all the employees in my company, or like, okay, who have worked for more than 5 years, who have this kind of performance rating, and who belong to that team. We can get all of that by simple clicking of different charts. Today tools make it possible for us. So once we visualize the data, then we need to build the concept or the story. That story building comes from us. So we are not only simple data processors. As human resource professionals, we understand that data. So till visualization, once things are put together, we need to build stories out of it. What does this data really tell me? What is the message that I'm getting? Am I seeing that attrition is happening in this bracket? Are there managers who are responsible for more success within their teams? Are we celebrating those successes? Are there leaders who focus a lot on their team's learning? How are our employee engagement surveys? Are they driven by some factors that we have not noticed so far? So these are the things which will come up in the concept or a story building. And finally, all of that bundled together into a presentation, data presentation to people who make decisions. When you present the data, when you compile all of that, we can go one more step beyond. So that's the last step. If you remember my second slide talking about the different kinds of analytics. So from predictive, we can move into prescriptive. What kind of forecast are we getting? Going back to the same example of cricket. So we have seen all the data. We have conceptualized the story. We have seen the trends. We have now presented. Now we are forecasting. Many different people can forecast for many different reasons. We can have the teams forecast or predict about what kind of team structure, what kind of playing order we are going to have. We can have the marketeers say that, okay, this kind of audience, this kind of the composition of audience is coming up, so this kind of product is going to sell over there. So many different kind of forecast can happen over there, and based on all this forecast, finally a business decision is taken. Inside the organizations, it can be a hiring decision, it can be a talent retention decision, it can be investment. I'll give a simple example. So if a global company wants to expand its footprint and kind of realizes that, okay, the markets where we are present today, they are becoming quite saturated and quite competitive. Now let's find out in 5 years from now, which all are the locations, which all are the countries, or if we talk about, let's say, India, which all are the cities which are going to be uh, more lucrative for us. Let's start looking at, okay, the big cities, they are already quite competitive. The cost structure is very high. Now let's talk about the tier two. or tier 3. In tier 2 and tier 3, let's look at what kind of infrastructure we have. What is the pass out rate of college graduates? What is the inflation in those states or those cities? What is the kind of growth happening in terms of, let's say, roads or internet bandwidth, stuff like that? You combine all of that. Based on that, now I come out with city A, or the town A, B, C. These are becoming my lucrative decisions for expanding business. This is where insights can be useful in helping the business. So I'll repeat what I told in the beginning. Data for the sake of data is not of much use. But when the data is converted into insights, and those insights are converted into business decisions, that's where the utility of analytics comes in. When we do all of that, there are a few things we have to keep in mind. This is just not the front end of data presentation like we told earlier. First, we have to ensure that there is data integrity. Data is right, it's complete, and it's useful. So that's where we look at the data integrity. The most critical step is probably around data security. A data analytics person or even HR analytics person has to be cognizant of the core data security. Data breach can be very heavy. We deal with very sensitive information. So data security, all the you know all the data analytics teams need to have their processes around data security, how data is stored, how data is retrieved, who will have access. So that's where the data security comes in as a step. Next, the policy and governance, which feeds into data security. What kind of policy we have, what kind of governance model we have. Finally, compliance. Increasingly, every country, every state is becoming more vigilant about data protection. Data protection acts are getting implemented everywhere. How are we compliant with those provisions? That's something we need to look at as a part of HR analytics or workforce analytics. So one part is getting the data to tell a story for a business decision. But the second part is how do we do all of that, ensuring there is integrity, security, and compliance with with respect to data. It's a very interesting field, and if you know we want to explore it further, there are many more opportunities. So what skills do we need as HR? I have kind of built 5 different levels. At the base, we need the basic statistics, spreadsheets, eye for details. As we make it more complex, we need to know more advanced statistics. If the basic statistics are more like central tendency, the averages and stuff like that, in advanced statistics we can talk about regression, we can talk about deviation and how they work. Then we talk about data visualization. Some of the images that you see over here are different ways of data visualization. There are many more ways of data visualization. These are just a few samples. At the next level, we talk about the storytelling. How do we integrate all these charts to convey what we mean to say? Just presenting a few charts is not good enough. What do we mean to convey? And finally, based on all of these, are we confident enough to make business forecast? That's where our ultimate skill, the highest skill comes in. If the kind of self-actualization, if we talk about the end point in the data analytics insight journey, is how can we make it useful for our business forecast? And when I say business, let me repeat, I don't mean only the organization's business. It can also, business also can mean, what is HR here for? What is the end objective of HR? What is our vision? Can we achieve that through analytics and insights? These are the skills that we need to keep on building to move to the level of maturity. Moving to my last slide, here are some of the sample metrics used in HR. Some of these are analytics, some of these are reports, some of these are insights. We can use these in recruitment. Some of the metrics which are most frequently used are like time to fill, or cost per hire. We can talk about source mix. We can talk about boomerang. It's like how many employees leave and come back. So they are the different statistics we can use on recruitment. Same goes with attrition. We can talk about engagement, and there are many other fields. This list is endless. I have used it just to kind of draw your attention to many different places or fields where we can use data analytics and insight. If you ask me, what are the kind of analytics that I really like? So when I can combine all of these to form a flow or a pattern from recruiting to engagement to performance to learning, attrition, what kind of diversity that we get, and how does this benefit in the organization. Combining all of that comes the overall workforce planning, and that's the kind of analytics that I enjoy the most because this helps in our long-term planning. With that, I would come to the end of the presentation. There are many insights that I'm sure you would be liking. And if you wish to connect, if you have any questions to ask, please feel free to share in this channel. I'll stop sharing the screen right now. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Suraj. So, one of the question which has come in is about what is the optimal team size for maximizing productivity based on historical performance data.
Can you please repeat the question?
What is the optimal team size for maximizing productivity based on historical performance of data? It's a combination of HR analytics plus the workforce
I
analytics, I
get that.
would say.
Thank you. Great question. Uh, my approach to this would be it would depend on the specific organization. It will depend on what kind of business are we in. Is it something labor intensive? That means we need a large workforce, or is it a team which is heavily technology dependent? So based on that, the team sizes will vary. Also, the kind of space that we work in. So from the organization to organization, this answer is going to vary.
Okay,
Thank you.
right. Thank you. So, audience out there, you can post your questions either in any of those channels. So, we will be able to answer these questions while Swaraj is here. So, the next question we can ask is how can workforce analytics be used in the field of succession planning and leadership development initiatives within the organization?
Beautiful question. This is something which is so relevant for all of us. Succession planning has always been a key part of human resources. We have seen this gain more momentum uh, at the during the time of pandemic, during the time of the Great Resignation, where all the organizations were scrambling to get resources. Though that was more of a reactive time, if we have to be proactive, because people analytics and insights are more about being proactive, we can predict, we can project based on the past trends. What is the average tenure of employees in our organization? If somebody joins from a campus, how long do they stay? If someone joins from the industry, how long do they stay? So based on that, we know what is the expected life cycle within the organization. We can also build a bridge with what kind of roles, what is the time to mature, what is the time to be completely productive. And we can also speak about what is the career path within the organization, what is the average time taken for people to grow from role A to role B or role C to role D, because all of these are going to be different. When you combine all of this, we can understand what is the time frame when leadership position in, let's say, a marketing tool is going to be, what kind of leadership teams are going positions are going to be available, which positions are at risk, and how do we prepare for that. Same goes with, let's say, technology. Technology changes. When do we expect the next technology revolution to come? Who are the people who are going to move in, or what are the positions which are going to be available, and how do we prepare for that? Succession planning is all about getting ready for meeting the future challenges, and analytics can combine all these streams to help making that prediction. And this is an
Thank
area
you.
we can keep on exploring. Thank you.
Yeah, and especially during the COVID times, what happened was that this analytics went topsy down, right? Because sometime what happened was that we didn't expect so much of resignation happening at that point of time, and the pyramid got tossed there. So, how did you manage in your organization? We don't want the real data over there, but then how did you manage the situation that time?
So I can give you the generic response from the industry. How did the industry react to it? So let me go back to cricket. You have all your predictions for a particular match. You know that if I maintain this kind of attack, if I get this kind of bowlers, I can contain my scorecard and all those things. But then you get a Rinku Singh coming in the last over, hitting whatever 4 or 5 sixes, and all predictions, all insights kind of going out of the stadium. Yes, there will be challenges when, though analytics and insights they depend heavily on the past trends, there will be situations like the Great Resignation when the past trends are not necessarily the indicators for the future. But once that trend starts, analytics can get into action by talking about, has the attrition increased? Where are the workforces being available? Which colleges can I go to now? Which cities can I hire from now? We can give those inputs, let's say, to the recruiting team, saying, hey, these are the areas that you need to focus on. We can build those pipelines. So the traditional answer is not going to hold here because the situation has changed. But how do we adjust to that situation? How do we adapt? That created the difference between the successful organizations versus not so successful ones. We need to adapt.
Thank you. So we will wait for some audience questions. If at all it's not coming through, I will push in my questions.
Sure.
How can organizations ensure data privacy? Because we spoke about data privacy and security, right? So, how can organizations ensure data security and privacy when collecting and storing sensitive workforce data for analytics purposes? So, see, one thing is that in India the law is different, but if you take in Europe and other areas, or some of them are quite sensitive about their personal data, and the personal data terms itself is very different from country to country. So your insights on those, please.
Sure. Well, there are two parts to this question. Let me answer the second part. Country to country, the the laws are different, the rules are different, the uh, policies are different. The definition of personal data also differs from country to country, right? There is no doubt about that.
Correct.
But the underlying principles are similar, and it comes to any HR practice, even the employment laws. The laws may be different, but the underlying principles are similar. Every country, it says that we need to protect employee privacy. We need to protect employee personal data, or the identifiable data. So that principle does not change. Yes, what do we define as personal data may vary a little bit from country to country, but more or less the principle is the same. Keeping that in mind, let's come back to the data security. So there are many levels in which we need to secure data. First, the biggest question is, what are we storing? What kind of data are we storing? And where are we storing? Okay, because different security rules may apply to different kind of data. Some data can be more accessible to others, like if we talk about any general organization, talking about employee name, official designation, manager name, these are normally common data, you know We need to maintain security definitely, but the level of security for somebody's, let's say, um, phone number, gender, or if we talk about any other kind of diversity data, personal insurance data, all these are high secure. So we need to understand what kind of security, where are we storing the data, and what kind of security measures we have around those. A data cannot be secure if every other person is having access to that data. So that at the gate itself, it has to be restricted. Few people need to have the access. It needs to be covered by a security system. You can design your security system whatever. It can be a software, it can be simple Excel which is password protected, or it can be, if it's a physical file, we need to provide those lockers and keys. So it can be different ways of securing, but we need to maintain at many level. And who accesses and how they are consuming that data, all those need to be governed. So data security is also about governance. Who is checking, who is reporting to, and how is that getting further used. So the security journey goes at multiple different levels.
Rightly said, sir. Now we will wait for some questions. Okay. So now that we spoke about diversity and inclusion, so I'm going to go into that direction right now. In the towards the last of the presentation, we had spoken about that. So how can HR leverage workforce analytics to identify and address diversity and inclusion gaps within the organization? Because that's the in thing and the in subject at this point of time, right?
This is one more area where I would say the kind of diversity we track may be different from country to country, from state to state. But again, the same underlying principle about diversity data is the same. So when we look at the diversity data, let's go with the most common, which is there across everywhere: gender diversity, male, female, or if the particular law requires, transgender. So those three genders, let's say. When you look at this data, we can apply this with the filter for every sphere. Let's look at recruiting. How is the recruiting combination between the different genders? Are we proportionately hiring more men than women? If that's the case, can we go back and check how is the talent pool? Some, if the colleges have similar number of gender distribution in their classes, is our hiring pattern also matching that? So that's how we can use it in the hiring. We can use that at attrition, or at retention, especially during the pandemic times. I think this many companies saw this ratio kind of getting impacted. What are
Yeah.
we doing? These are analytics, these are the data. But if we see that there is some impact, are we going behind the scene and trying to understand what kind of people getting impacted and why? Are there specific teams? Is it more challenging for some roles than the other? Then, as organizations, can we take measures to counter these impacts? That's where the success of workforce planning coming in 2 years from now, in 5 years from now, how do we achieve that equity? That's where our journey should be in, and HR analytics can help a great deal on that. It's not only about knowing the distribution, it's about what are we doing about it. That's where insights come in.
Okay, wonderful, Swaraj. So we have one question right now from the audience. How we can select right kind of data analytics tool? What are the tools available for simple data analytics? It's already there in the screen too.
Sure. If I talk about the simplest data analytics, for several years, my favorite has been MS Excel. Use Excel. It kind of takes everything. We can build charts, we can build graphs, we can do analyze. Even today, I use Excel a lot. Okay, so that's a simple. the most useful tool. If we go to the next level, if your organization uses some kind of ERP or HRIS software, they will have their own analytics tools. Learn those and make best use of those. Many times, what people realize after going to the market and buying expensive data analysis tools, they realize that their HRIS system is already providing that. So first explore. So that's the second level of tools. Third level, we can use so many free softwares available, but there is a disclaimer here. If you are using any free software on your own, please, my advice, please don't use those to analyze your organization's data, because here comes the threat of data security. I can use that to analyze cricket scores, okay, but not for the organization data, because third party softwares, if they are not licensed, and if I'm using a free tool, whoever is using that has to be 100% sure that security is not getting breached, not getting compromised. That's in the data journey, that's completely not acceptable. Finally, there are tools, the tools available. I can name a couple right now. Let's say Power BI, or something like a Tableau, which are very popular nowadays. I personally use Power BI a lot, and I found it extremely useful. But again, all these tools have to be licensed, have to be proper, and second, under no condition we should take confidential data and analyze those on a non-confidential platform. That would be a clear, breach of data security.
So open tools is a big no-no.
Open tools is a big
Exactly.
no-no if it's classified data. If it's cricket scores, yes, please go ahead.
Understand. So, see, some of days, some of the time, what happens is that HR professionals try and use so much of data analytics right now, trying to go and present to the leadership and stakeholders. So, what are some of the effective communicative methods and workforce analytics findings, especially to the leadership and stakeholders, to drive decision making and strategic planning, especially because on the business forecast and the business opportunities, see, the business opportunities keep on changing, right? So today it might be at 100% business opportunity, tomorrow it might go at 60%, tomorrow in 2 months time again it will go to 100%. So since it's a fluid situation, how can the HR professionals help in such situations?
I would suggest a couple of things. First, start with the end in mind first. That means, what is really useful for business? Let's start building data based on that. So from the beginning, we need to keep the last step in mind. So that's one of the basic agile principles, right? We know the end requirements in the beginning. Second, if the data is fluid, if the data is fluctuating, it's possible. We saw in 2022, was a classic example. In the beginning, we saw the great resignations, and suddenly we saw the great slowdown. So when the data changes, we need to adapt to it. We need to adapt our predictions. We need to adjust. Please keep in mind, data forecast made once is like the ultimate truth forever. It has to change, and we have to adjust. So don't go with a very high level which just says that, okay, I expect attrition to be X%, so my hiring should be Y. It can be, my attrition can be X% if one, two, three conditions are there. If this change, then I expect the graph to go higher, stays linear, come down. I'm sure you'll be seeing those kind of predictions if you go to the stock market sites, right? How the stock prices will
Yes.
vary. So they keep on
Correct.
adjusting to the trends.
So it will have a previous 1 or 2 years
Yeah,
data, and based on that, so base something similar to that would have to be used here also,
yeah.
right? Yes. Okay. So what are some of the emerging trends and technologies in workforce analytics that HR professionals, as HR professionals, we should be aware of?
I think data space is something which is getting completely revolutionized right now. As we speak, let's go back 2 years. I'm talking about the India. job market scenario. 2 years back, if somebody looked for a HR analytics job in a job portal, the number of choices were going to be very minimal. Today, there are so many opportunities coming up. Organizations are setting up bigger and bigger data analytics cells. But so the opportunities are more. So the focus is there. But the biggest disruptor that I see coming in this space is AI, is
Yeah.
artificial intelligence, or you know, which can go much deeper into data analytics. Right now, AI is still evolving. We don't know exactly, can we feed last 5 years data and get the trends based on this trend what happened. AI is capable of that. Many companies are moving in the direction of AI. AI is going to give us those predictions, those predictions. Now, does that mean that data analytics as a space is not going to be there? I don't think so. Because AI can give us the trends. AI can tell us what might happen. But ultimately,
Hmm.
making stories out of it, making business cases out of those, making proposals out of those, and implementing those in day to day work will still be our role. AI can give us the input, but we need to take that input and get the output which will be useful for the business. I see that there is a question already on AI. I think that kind of
Yeah,
fits
yeah.
into that.
How AI is going to change the data analytics and visualization.
It's definitely going to change. It would be, unwise to assume that AI is not going to have any impact, but we can leverage on it. We can learn. We don't have to really learn how can we write programs in AI, but we have to learn how can we use AI, like the HRIS tools. We don't have to understand how to write codes in HRIS, but we have to understand how we can implement HRIS for our own advantage. That would be the game changer.
Okay. Thank you. So now we will go to the last question. How can workforce analytics be used to measure and improve employee engagement and retention rates? I'm sure that we touched upon retention already and some of the attrition as well. But then, how can we do with the employee engagement?
I would say engagement and retention are two sides of the same
Yeah.
coin.
Yes,
They
yes,
are
it
so
is.
closely interlinked. Very frequently I get questions from people saying that what are the steps you can take to control attrition or to improve retention. I would say the best step to improve retention is to invest in your engagement. So we can use analytics to find out how are the engagement trends, what are the factors which are feeding into engagement. Some people may say it's money. Okay, I don't know, it may be true. Some people would say it's careers, some people would say it's the managers, some people would say the kind of learning I'm getting. So it will vary from company to company, from the workforce, from the maturity of the workforce, from the nature of work you do. So we can combine all of these to improve engagement, which in turn helps improve retention.
Okay, wonderful. Because the maturity level of the organization, of course, is a factor upon what kind of employee engagement would be right fit for that organization. So, I think we are coming to end of the session. So, any final thoughts from you, Swaraj, before we wind up
Well,
in terms of workforce analytics?
all I would like to say is, I, though I have played many different roles in many different companies in last almost 25 years, I have always been passionate about analytics and I've seen it evolving. If 25 years ago or 24 years ago when I started, I used to focus more on simple tables to analyze the data, things have changed. And I've seen its use in all different aspects of HR. You can see that I'm naturally excited about this topic because I see
Yes,
analytics and
yes.
insights as the future of human resources, no matter which aspect of HR that you work in. So I wish you all a successful journey.
Thank you, Swaraj. It was a wonderful session. It was a great insight from various facets. Hope I was able to bring in justice to all the areas and all the questions out there from the audience and
Thank you.
from our point of view. Thank you, Swaraj, for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you all out there for joining us on our 16th edition of Audio Rooms. All of you who are watching us live, if you want to know more about NIPM, please don't hesitate to contact us in our LinkedIn page. Watch, share, and subscribe, and stay tuned to this space. Our HR Carnival, which comprises of HR Business Quiz, DEI Awards, Launcher, will have its finale in the third week of June. HR Carnival has audio rooms, which is one of this program. So thank you everyone and good night to you.